Well, I'm here with Lauren Canterberry again. This is the third time. The last two times we've talked about things dying, and today we're going to talk about it. Well, it could be related to death. It is related to death. So this is the third time where we've talked about things related to death. But there's been a bunch of different stuff that's happened in the past couple of weeks related, politically, legally with the Supreme Court. And it feels like every day a new major thing happens. Like right before we recorded this, I just was on my phone and saw that Dan Bongino and Kash Patel are going to leave their positions in the government if Pam Bondi doesn't get fired or doesn't leave because of the Jeffrey Epstein. So it's like something's happening all the time. And so you can never stay fully up to date. But I wanted to talk about two things that you reported on. One of them being, and I'm forgetting how to pronounce it right now. Can you pronounce it for me so I don't sound stupid right now?
No, you're good. The abortion drug Mifepristone.
Yeah. Mifepristone. See, I'm never going to have to even worry about using it. One, because it's wrong. Two, because I'm a man. So Mifepristone. Okay, well, can you just start by explaining what this story is and what exactly you reported on here?
Yeah. So to back up a little bit, Mifepristone is one of two drugs that's used in chemical abortions. Mifepristone is the drug that blocks the production of progesterone. So it starves the unborn baby of that very important hormone. And then usually, I think about 2 days after a woman takes that pill, they take misoprostol, which begins contractions and causes her to miscarry her child. So these two drugs have been used for decades to do this in the United States. Mifepristone was first approved in the year 2000 for abortion specifically. It is used in rare occasions for other medical issues and has been since before the year 2000, but very specific cases. It was not a very common drug by any means. So the story that I reported on was that a few months ago, a report came out where researchers analyzed essentially insurance claims data.
Yeah.
And they were able to gather the codes of women who were prescribed an abortion, who then attended or visited the emergency room. And they were able to track those codes and see some of the negative effects of this drug being taken by women. And their data went from, let me just double check. So 2017 to 2023. And essentially, the long story short is that this research found that women are experiencing serious negative mental or negative physical effects, side effects from Mifepristone that are not reported by the FDA. They're not on the safety label. They're not discussed with women when they're given this drug. All of the safety warnings for this are still from the initial approval by the FDA and not after many changes have been made to how this is used.
So if you go back, let's go back to 2000 when this thing was put on the market, when this drug was put on the market. What sort of studies had they done at it up to that point? And well, I guess, can you explain to me how it's different? Like how in 2000 was it like, oh, this is all good, and then now we're finding out that it's actually not good? What happened between 2000 and now?
Yeah. So the drug itself is not any different, but how it's used is very different. So in the year 2000, it received approval after 10 clinical trials that followed about 30,000 patients. They found that serious adverse events were less than 0.5% of women. That was their finding. They determined at that point for women, it was essentially safe. Of course, we know it's not safe for the unborn baby. In almost all cases, it's fatal. But for the women who they were studying, it was typically safe. The big difference is that in all of those clinical trials, women had to attend an in-person appointment with a physician 3 times. They had to attend an appointment to determine the gestational age of their baby and determine where the baby was. So they ruled out ectopic pregnancies, which is essentially where a fetus implants somewhere other than the uterus and will not survive. And they also ruled out any other major complications like missed miscarriage, things like that. They attended a second appointment at which they took the pills with a physician present. And then they had to attend a follow-up appointment to make sure that they had completed the abortion, that there was no remaining tissue, that they weren't suffering any bleeding. Basically, like a normal woman would go back to the doctor 6 to 8 weeks after she has a baby to make sure everything's working correctly. So they had to do that.
Yeah.
What's different is over the last 25 years, different administrations have chipped away at those protections. So in 2016, the Obama administration relaxed the guidelines by requiring only 2 in-office visits. And they increased the ability for women to take it up to 10 weeks rather than 7 weeks. So 3 weeks makes a big difference in pregnancy, especially at that point. I mean, the growth is quick and rapid. And so there's more blood, there's more tissue by 10 weeks. And then in 2021, the Biden administration completely removed any requirements to have an in-person visit. And in 2023, they allowed retail pharmacies to dispense Mifepristone. So that's where you start getting the mail order Mifepristone. So where in 2000, it was highly, highly controlled. This was only given under incredible medical observation. Now women can get Mifepristone without ever seeing a doctor. A woman could be in her second trimester and she could obtain this drug and take it and never have to confirm how far along she is, where the pregnancy is, if she's had a missed miscarriage, things that would make it a lot more dangerous for her to take this. But without seeing a doctor, without having to go somewhere to get the pills, it's just up to chance.
Yeah. Well, it seems to me, just from hearing what you just said, that there seems, I can't figure out why anybody would ever continue to sort of relax the restrictions on access unless they had a goal. Like, is the goal to have more abortions, to allow for women to have more abortions? Like, or am I just drawing a conclusion too soon? Do you know why they kept taking off these restrictions, or not even just restrictions, just making sure you're going in for these appointments to figure out, or I guess a couple of weeks after you've taken the drug? Or what's the motive? Do you know the motive?
Yeah, so it seems like the main reason has been, in their words, increasing access to pregnancy healthcare is what they always call it. But you said it exactly right, increasing the ability for women to get an abortion, all in the name of being pro-choice. Yeah. A lot of pro-abortion advocates called these protections restrictive and said that they would prevent women from accessing the care that they need, accessing, I'm sorry if you can hear that.
No, I didn't hear anything. What?
Okay, my dog is drinking water very loudly.
Oh,
sorry.
I don't hear it. But that's we could feature the dog in the podcast. So there you go.
I'll start over.
Yeah, you're good.
Sorry
you're
about
good.
that.
No, you're fine.
Yeah. So the people who are pro-abortion tend to believe that any protections, as we would call them, are restrictions. They make it difficult for a woman to get an abortion if, say, her family doesn't approve, or if she's possibly going to talk to a doctor who might dissuade her from getting an abortion. They said that these things were infringing on her rights to choose her own healthcare and do what's best for her body. But the problem is that they also kept saying, well, the research has proven that this is safe. This has been used for decades, so obviously it's safe. And women aren't dying from this. Women aren't having complications. Like, we have these studies and prove that it's safe for a woman to take. And the issue is they make all these claims while chipping away at the very thing that did result in that level of safety.
Yeah. Yeah, this seems to be one of the problems with the 1990s Democrat safe, legal. What do they always say about abortion? It was like safe,
legal, and rare.
And rare. And so we got to just allow for abortion. And also it's like an indictment against people who say that the slippery slope argument isn't legitimate. It's like, it seems pretty legitimate. I think we're noticing that right now in a lot of areas of life. But for this, it seems very legitimate. Maybe I didn't catch this, but so you said the drug was used differently before than it's used now. Like, how is it that the results of the data that we have now and the testing that they had back in 2000 are so different? It's still the same drug and women are still using it, right? So what's the difference?
Yeah. So the difference is not what it's used for. It's
Sure.
how it's prescribed,
Sure.
which makes all the difference. So it means that women who would not have been given Mifepristone in the year 2000
Gotcha.
up through 2016 are now able to get it. We're seeing women who have an ectopic pregnancy and they don't know it because an ectopic pregnancy is still going to show up as pregnant on a pregnancy test, but does require significant medical intervention and requires a doctor's diagnosis. We're seeing women like that who would not have been given this drug earlier under previous guidelines. They now can, and then when it doesn't work, a lot of those women are the ones who are then going to an emergency room because they're suffering a hemorrhage or they're having serious pain in their abdomen and discovering then that they have this ectopic pregnancy.
Wow.
So the reason the data is showing such high levels of serious adverse events is because more women are taking it and more women who really should not be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No women should be taking it, but definitely women who definitely should not be taking it even. Yeah. Right. So I get what you're saying. So now it's just basically gotten out of control. So can people, you said they can get this mailed to their house. Is that true?
Yeah. There are clinics, even one in New York who there was a lawsuit brought against her by Texas and I believe Louisiana as well, because this doctor in New York who's licensed to administer this drug in New York was sending it through the mail to patients in states that have abortion bans.
Wow.
And they have networks online where women can access this. And like I said, there is no check. You don't even have to talk with a doctor. You don't have to message with a doctor. You can just request it. So there's no way of knowing how far along these women are in their pregnancy, but they can gain access to it.
Is there an age verification or anything like that?
I'm not sure. That might vary by the network or by the doctor, but it seems like it would be pretty difficult to verify something like that as well. Yeah. We did have one case that went out of Louisiana. It was a minor who received the abortion pill and was coerced into taking it. So
yeah, this is stressful to even talk about because there's like, what do you do about this other than restricting the drug altogether, which would be fantastic. And I don't think that's going to happen, but it would be amazing. How do you what can you do so that they can't send it over state lines into states that have made this illegal? Like what has that resulted in anything yet? Or has anything come of that?
Not yet. So they're definitely trying to figure that out. It would be very difficult to monitor the mail in that way, especially because it's not just the United States Postal Service. You have other mail carriers. So there are, of course, things that are not allowed to be mailed. But to restrict something of this nature would require a great deal of oversight. The experts I spoke with said, the key right now is getting the FDA at the very least to review this data and look at their warning label. Because though that wouldn't stop mifepristone from being sent across state lines. At the very least, physicians would be notified of a change in the safety label, and that could result, hopefully, in some more oversight with who's receiving this. But yeah, with the mail order mifepristone, it's really tricky. There's a lot of moving parts with that to figure it out.
That's horrible. This all sounds absolutely horrible. So you talked about in this, I mean, I read it, you wrote an article. I don't think I mentioned that, but you wrote a report on this on World News. And you mentioned the two women who died in Georgia related. Can you talk about that and talk about these women and what exactly happened?
Yeah. So my coworker, Leah, actually last year wrote about this. There was a ProPublica piece that got a lot of traction that covered 2 deaths in Georgia of women a couple of years ago. They were separated by about a year, who both had taken mifepristone and then both went to the hospital with serious side effects and ended up dying. So one of the cases was, it truly does seem like it was negligence on the part of the hospital. They delayed treating her sepsis that she came in with. Both of these women obtained their pills in North Carolina because Georgia has very strict pro-life laws. And it seems like it was the hospital, for whatever reason, delayed treating her in that case, delayed giving her a DNC. Her baby had already passed away. But that hospital was slow to act, not because of the pro-life law, but some sort of medical negligence that's being investigated separately. The other woman, she came in with serious complications as well. Her babies had already died, and she just had waited so long to seek care that they weren't able to save her life. So the media really painted this as a result of the pro-life laws, that the doctors refused to treat them because they had taken this drug, or that they had essentially had no other choice but to seek out this drug out of state and take it on their own. But in reality, it was the complications from taking mifepristone that resulted in their deaths. Which
they'll never, ever bring up, right? Like, I mean, these people will never talk about that.
Right.
And it's also just very frustrating that they can just throw, I mean, a ton of people will believe that it was pro-life laws that killed these women and that that's just a fact. And if there was more pro-abortion, pro-murdering baby laws, then, everything would be all good. That's, and they could just say that. I guess, is there any, I know this isn't exactly about the death of these two women, but is there any way to hold these media companies accountable for this stuff? Because that's crazy to me. I can't believe you can just lie about that. And I get that's part of free speech, and you have to allow people to say whatever they want. But can you hold them accountable at all for that, or no?
I mean, Leah's piece did a really great job. She debunked their claims one by one. And I've seen one of the pro-life medical colleges came out afterwards and also broke down these 2 cases and kind of illustrated the actual medical issues that resulted in their deaths, that they weren't tied to the laws. But unfortunately, that's a bit of the extent to hold them accountable, is to write corrections. And then it's just up to the audience seeking that out, or it gaining enough traction for people to see. The other hard thing about combating these messages is that they use very different language than we use. So things like a miscarriage, where unfortunately the baby has already passed away, they call that abortion care. Same with an ectopic pregnancy. They claim that treating an ectopic pregnancy, which is not inherently trying to kill the baby, they claim that that is also abortion care. So then they are able to make these broad claims that abortion bans prevent women from getting care for those things, when there are exceptions in all of these laws. So it's very difficult beyond just continuing to publish truth and hoping that reaches readers.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that is I can't stand when you hear that the left wing media is they'll just blatantly lie about things basically to just not have to deal with the truth. And the truth is a lot darker in this case than and a lot of people even want to think about the fact that people can just get this stuff mailed to their house without any sort of medical expertise or no doctors, nobody. Yeah.
And one doctor I spoke with, I mean, she called this medical malpractice, and essentially it is because she made the clear point of any medication you receive, any shots, any treatments, if anyone's ever been to the doctor, if anyone has a child, you have to sign off on everything that you're given. You have to understand the potential complications. You have to understand exactly what it is that you're receiving or your child is receiving for you to give informed consent.
Yeah.
And for these women to be given Mifepristone and being told there's a less than 1% chance that you have serious adverse effects, when that's simply not true, is not giving them the information they need to give informed consent, which informed consent is something that pro-abortion groups pretend to be very about.
Liberals love consent. That's like all they talk about.
They love consent. Yeah. They want to know, like, you have to say yes to everything. And yet this thing that rubs up against the pro-abortion movement, they suddenly don't think it's as important that women really know what this is doing.
Right.
Which, again, this is almost always fatal for the child. But we're also not treating women properly if we're not telling them the risks.
It's not informed because the studies that were done in 2000 were basically entirely based on an entirely different system that these women used than what is today. And so based on the data, the new data that the 2017 data, maybe I'm just like losing my mind right now, but did you mention what the complications were in the new data, or like, has it skyrocketed? You said like less than 1% in 2000. Then what was it in 2017?
Yeah. So the data is from 2017 to 2023.
Okay.
And I'm trying to find the exact number.
I want to say it was
found that it was nearly 11% of women
that's crazy,
who took this drug had some sort of event. And so they classified events as visiting the emergency room, specifically with relation to this drug, hemorrhage, ectopic pregnancy that required surgery, sepsis, other forms of infection, serious mental issues that were connected clearly to having taken this drug. And then they had a more catch-all category that included things like damage to internal organs, additional pain in other areas, things like that. So there were pretty big events and effects that they recorded, and things that surprisingly already are on the warning label, but to a lesser extent.
But I mean, FDA, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're good. The FDA, it says that some bleeding is to be expected, and that hemorrhage can be a side effect. But again, they say it's less than 1% chance, when this data is saying 11% of women have experienced something that was so serious they had to go to the emergency room.
Yeah, it feels like somebody should go to prison for being off by 10%. Or manipulating the data and manipulating the labels over a span of 17 to 23 years.
I certainly think it calls into question the reliability of the FDA. They had to okay these changes to the requirements for administering this drug, and yet did not commission any additional studies as the variables were changing.
It feels like, the FDA has been called into question like a million times in the past 5 years. It seems like, so it's not like there's much trust in the institution anyways, but I just can't believe how you could, point like less than 1%. And then actually it's 11%. That's just, you're off by over 10%. that just seems like willful negligence. That just seems like you're doing this on purpose. You want more babies to die. You want to kill more babies. And that's horrible. And I don't even know how you solve that. I feel like that's what the America is dealing with right now is how do you solve these massive sins that have gone under wraps, undercover for decades and decades. What do you do about it now? Because they're all coming to light and coming to fruition in people's lives being ruined, people being killed. I mean, you have the COVID jab. We don't even know what that's going to result in. We don't have all of the data on that. We probably never will. I know you just report on this stuff, but what do you do about on the legal level? Like, what's the goal? I guess what would be the goal for conservative Christians is just to ban this thing and get rid of it. Like if you were the king of America, if you were the queen, if you were the queen of America, what would you do?
You know, I mean, I and the researchers and pro-life doctors that I spoke with, all of us agree, if we could, we would just ban the use of this drug for abortions. Because like I said at the beginning, Mifepristone itself does have uses in a very small amount of other medical cases. And it was used for that before abortion. But I don't see any reason why we can't say, okay, this drug is approved for only this and not for abortion. We do that with many different drugs.
That's what they wanted with ivermectin.
Right.
They were like, this is only horse dewormer or whatever. It's not for
and
humans.
And that's all of the weight loss drug, Ozempic. It initially was just for diabetes, and then someone discovered it could do something that removed the need for them to control or take accountability for their own actions. And so now they can use it for something completely different. And I think that's the real core of this issue is, and why it's so hard to fully ban abortion as it should be, is we don't want to be accountable. We want to have a quick fix. People want to be able to use abortion as birth control because especially with these chemical methods, it is just another form of birth control. They don't have to go to a doctor. They don't have to go to get surgery to remove their unborn baby. They can just take a pill as though they had been taking a birth control pill. So yes, if I was the queen of America, of course, I would immediately ban this, especially for this use.
And then you would democratize America so that we wouldn't have queens or kings anymore. No, I get that. If I was Fox News right now, we go straight into an Ozempic commercial, you know, so that's how that, anyways. It's a really bad thing. And just when I was reading through the article that you put out, it feels a little bit hopeless. I don't want to be gloom and doom or anything because I think that people can make good decisions. And just because there's a bad option out there doesn't mean that you have to engage with it. You can actually say no to this stuff. But there seems to be a very strong effort from the left to kill as many babies as they possibly can, which is a sacrilege. I mean, we know the civilizations that have existed through history, when they're at their worst, are just slaughtering babies all the time. And that is what makes a civilization very bad. And it's a sign that you're at the end of a civilization in a lot of ways. And we've outdone every one of those civilizations probably every month. We probably outdo all of human history just because of our technology. And this is just another technology. And I think, tell me if I'm wrong, is you can't really track the data perfectly with these sorts of drugs. Like, because they're taken. I mean, people order them in the mail. You don't know if they're taking them or what the whole situation is. But like, I've always been under the impression that there are a lot more abortions happening than we even know. And we know that there are a lot of abortions happening. Is that right?
Right. And that's something the researchers said as well is this is public insurance data, so things like Medicaid. And then also they obtained data from, I think, most major insurers. However, there are many, many women who are buying these drugs in cash because they don't want that charge to come through their insurance. So the researchers said, this is a shocking number, but this isn't all of them. There's definitely women who are taking this that we have no way of capturing that data, especially with the lax restrictions on how it's dispensed. If a woman doesn't even go to a doctor, then there's no trail there either. So you're right. There are hundreds of thousands of women who are going through with this, and there's no way for us to track that. So, and even some of them, if they do have to go to the emergency room, still would rather pay in cash than see this come through on their insurance.
Yeah. Do you suspect the Trump administration is going to put any more restrictions on this or reverse some of what has been done in the past 20 years or so?
So the health secretary was asked by a senator just after this article came out, not mine, the research. Right after it came out, he said that he has directed the FDA to review it. I'm not sure if they will or not. I see no reason why they shouldn't.
Yeah.
So at the very least, I'm hopeful in that sense, because this is pretty damning evidence. It would be negligent of them to not at least look at their own records. They have access to all the same data.
Yes.
And more because they have access to other insurers that wouldn't provide it for this research. In terms of changing regulations, though, on abortion pills themselves, sadly, the administration's been pretty clear that they have no intention of taking away the abortion pill.
Yeah.
Trump has really held firm on making this a state issue, which when Roe v. Wade was overturned, I think that was a big celebration that voters were able to say that they did not want abortion happening in their state. But when you get down to the nitty gritty of it and the truth of it, this is an instance of murder. And murder is something that's illegal at a federal level. So personally, I think this should be legislated at the federal level because it's not just a states' rights discussion. It's something that affects everybody. So I don't.
But personally and logically,
and
I mean, it's logic. It's like, okay, is it illegal to murder somebody on a federal level right now?
Right.
Yes. Okay. Well, then case closed. It's a person because it's not even a scientific argument. We know that that's a human being. No scientist, no biologist worth their salt can tell me that it's not a human being, and it's and so logically, personally, whatever it is, convictionally, that's a human being and it should be outlawed across the country. That was a weird thing. You're kind of right. Like when Roe was overturned, I was happy. Everybody was happy because at least it meant that you could have individual states that could fully outlaw it and we could work towards that at an individual level. And I do think when you localize things like that, it makes it a lot easier to make larger impact because changing something on the federal level is really difficult. But I personally would, I don't know, call me an abolitionist. I just want to get rid of murder. So I want to abolish murder, which is like a scary thing to say, that's what like people think that's so bad. The Democrats don't like that. But so it doesn't look like the Trump administration is really going to do anything about this. They'll probably look into it maybe, but they're probably not going to do much. At
the very least, I could potentially see them changing the warning label on this drug. I think there's been enough discussions around this even before this research came out, just anecdotally from physicians saying, hey, we're seeing major complications from women taking this when they should not be. So I wouldn't be surprised if that kind of change came out of it. But on the legislative side, in terms of restricting it, again, I would love at the very least for them to restrict male abortions. And some of these lawsuits, like the one out of Texas and Louisiana, those are being fought at a federal level. They could potentially make it to the Supreme Court. So that could be something that we see come down. But from the administration itself, I'd be pretty surprised if they make any kind of broad sweeping changes.
Dang. Wow.
But we'll see.
Yeah,
They've surprised us before.
That's true. That's true.
I want to be hopeful, but
Right.
sadly, I don't know that this is always top of mind.
No. Yeah, well, especially like when Melania put her whole book out right before the election, and it was pro-abortion. She had a bunch of pro-abortion nonsense in there, and it's like, for women have the freedom to choose. It's like the language is so old and boring and tired at this point. It's for anybody. What I've noticed is that for people who like just want to believe that narrative and that lie, they're just okay with it. They know that it's a lie, but they're just like, yeah, but I just want to believe that lie, which is a good thing, because I think for a long time there was a lot of people who actually thought, oh yeah, I guess if we want to be consistent in our desire for freedom in America, we have to let women murder babies, which is a total problem. But there was a while where people like didn't really argue against that. Now it just feels like we're choosing sides. Like, do you want to murder babies or do you not want to murder babies? And that's been the question. There is another story that you reported on related to, not exactly related to this, but related to abortion. And the Supreme Court ruling on South Carolina not giving Medicaid funds to Planned Parenthood. And this is, I feel like this is a big story. And also maybe, I didn't write this into the questions, but we could tie it in with the big, beautiful bill defunding Planned Parenthood for a year, which is good, but also the big, beautiful bill I don't like because it spends too much money that we don't have. Anyways, tell me about the Supreme Court ruling on South Carolina.
Right. So this stems out of a case where essentially the governor decided to end the allowance for Medicaid to be used at Planned Parenthood. Like any insurance provider, the government gets to decide where and which clinics they will send funding. So it's just like if you have a normal insurance provider, you could have an in-network or out-of-network, and that's going to change how you get paid or how you pay for your care. Right. So they decided, hey, we are not sending any Medicaid funding, which is taxpayer money, to Planned Parenthood because they do abortions. There is a federal law that prevents taxpayer money from paying for abortions. However, one could argue that it's very difficult to determine if Planned Parenthood really is segregating out all of the money that they receive. Are they really able to say this money came from taxpayers and is only going to things like STD testing and birth control and not to abortions? It's unlikely. And that was basically the argument that South Carolina was making of, they can claim that these are two separate buckets, but it's the whole goal of Planned Parenthood is to perform abortions. And now they do transgender interventions as well. And so South Carolina said, we're not paying for that. Several other states had already done this or were in the process and were fighting it in the courts. A woman and the Planned Parenthood that's based in South Carolina, there were only 2 clinics in the state, filed a lawsuit. So there's one in Columbia and one in Charleston, which is great, but there's only 2.
Hold on. How? Probably because of that law, right? Is that what it is?
I think it's more because gradually over the years, at the time, South Carolina was also battling its heartbeat law. So it was coming in and out of effect. So after Dobbs, South Carolina became a bit of a travel hub for abortions in the South because it was in between the heartbeat bill being passed by the state legislatures, but it was on hold as it made its way through the courts. It was eventually approved, and so it is in effect now. But surprisingly, South Carolina only has 2, I think largely because there has been a big push against abortion in the state. It's just been fighting its way through the battle or through the courts. So the 2 abortion clinics in the state and an individual woman sued the state, essentially saying that they were infringing on her right to choose her provider, which they claimed is an allowance of Medicaid. It technically is not. There's language that would suggest that people should be allowed to choose their provider, but it's not explicit. And that's basically what the Supreme Court case boiled down to, was the court said, South Carolina can do this because there's no language in this act that established Medicaid that requires them to pay to any provider that you choose just because you're on Medicaid.
Wow.
So yeah,
wow.
It's a bit convoluted, but
sure.
it got it done. The point. So
I mean, what do you think's going to come of this, I guess, across the country? Because it was a massive story when it came out. I was like, wow, this is great. Good for people in South Carolina. Things still suck here in Wisconsin, but like good for them. What's going to happen everywhere else? Does this set some sort of precedence, or does this give hope or anything to the rest of the country? Have there been any other cases since then that have come up across the country?
Not since then, but there were a few that were kind of stuck in the courts ahead of that. I don't remember exactly which states. I know Arkansas was one of them, and Alabama had considered this as well. So certainly with this now being legal precedent, it means that other states could do the same thing and fully pull Medicaid funding from Planned Parenthood in their states, which is great. I talked to a woman who works at a crisis pregnancy center there in Columbia, and she was saying that they only do abortions a few days a week, and they are outside praying with women who go in and out of the clinic every day, and they definitely see foot traffic is completely dropping off on days when they do health care, as they call it, which is mostly STD testing, some family planning, birth control, and then also the transgender drugs and things like that. So she's hopeful, and a lot of pro-life groups are hopeful that this would gain traction and then Planned Parenthood would have to shut. Because another point she made is that within like a 5-mile radius of the Planned Parenthood in Columbia, there are over a dozen other clinics that do accept Medicaid. And even if they don't, or if someone doesn't even have Medicaid, their costs for those health cares, like STD testing or just general checkups, are far less than Planned Parenthood. Women can get care somewhere else, better care for a lot less money. So there's really no reason for Planned Parenthood to be there other than abortions. Yeah,
all that other stuff that they do is just a cover. I mean, they don't care about STDs or whatever. They don't care at all about STDs. They murder babies. They don't care about STDs. So they're not interested in any of that. That is just all there so that I think they can create a lot of this sort of ambiguity and confusion in the courts. And like, well, we do all these other things that are really important that people need. And so you can't completely take funding away from us. And I just think we should probably just take funding away from them and everything else. Did you report on the big, beautiful bill? It feels weird saying it because it's such a weird name, but the big, beautiful bill on Planned Parenthood?
I didn't. I was in the middle of another story at the time, so my coworker did, but I was following it. I was disappointed to see that they only dropped it to 1 year. It had been a few years is initially or I think it was indefinitely.
Seriously?
But it might not have been indefinitely. It was definitely a few years, but they dropped it down to only 1, which was disappointing. But I think it's a similar case to South Carolina. Just like South Carolina argued, you can't show that Planned Parenthood is only using your money for healthcare and not abortions. And if there's a federal law preventing taxpayer money from paying for abortions, then why are we funding Planned Parenthood with taxpayer money?
Yeah.
I would love to see that be a separate bill because this one certainly was big. I don't love shoehorning so many causes into one piece of legislation. Yeah. I think it makes it easy to whittle down the strength like we saw with whittling down the time frame. But I'm glad that it at least did pass for this year.
Yeah, it's bittersweet because it's like okay, defund Planned Parenthood for a year. That's obviously a good thing. Lives will be saved for sure, and that's great. And I'm very happy. There's no, like you said, there's no long-term advantage to this. You're not really doing anything other than if some Planned Parenthood locations close over the next year just because they don't have the funding, then that's great. Right. It might be more difficult to start those back up again. Who knows? Mm-hmm. Who knows how that's all going to work? But then on the other hand, you're like, but you're also just screwing your kids and your grandkids over financially for a long time because we're adding $3 trillion to the deficit in 10 years, in the next 10 years. And we obviously are spending money we don't have. And there was a tectonic shift in the fiscal philosophy of the Republican Party, which used to be, let's not spend a bunch of money the Democrats do it, so we're going to do it too. And that's basically what happened. And Trump just objectively lied about balancing the budget, which he promised on the campaign. So he just totally lied about that, which is very frustrating. And real quick, there's one more thing. Elon Musk then went and started his own political party, which is going to create a bunch of factions within the factions within the Republican Party. Everything's breaking down. Now you're going to have a bunch of the libertarians leave and go join the Elon Musk American Party or whatever that is. And I think that this big, beautiful bill probably had more negative than positive in the long run. I have no clue why they wanted to pass this. It makes no sense. And there were like a couple of Republicans, obviously Thomas Massey, but he can, I don't know, he complains about everything. But even like Ron Johnson, Rand Paul, some of these guys who are like, this is just kind of a stupid idea and we shouldn't do this because we're spending $3 trillion in the next decade. That's frustrating. So, it is a win. The Planned Parenthood thing is a win. The Supreme Court ruling definitely is a win. But do you see any of that catching? Like, do you see this having any lasting significant impact on, maybe people are like, well, I guess we can defund it. Like it can happen. We haven't done that in a long time. Or do you just think it's just sort of like a one and done and we'll just move past it?
I'd like to hope that it would be a continual discussion and one that, like I said, should be legislated separately.
Yeah.
But I've also already seen reports even before the bill passed of saying there was something like 13 Planned Parenthoods were on the verge of closing if it passed, and it's passed. So at the very least, I am hopeful that Planned Parenthoods will have to close because of this. And it will be difficult to reopen them, or at the very least, they'll have to get a lot more creative with how they raise funding. And that's a lot more eyes on the types of people that are funding this. So I'm hopeful there. I think defunding Planned Parenthood holistically, I'm hopeful. I think there's enough people at this point in Congress who are starting to recognize that it truly just is not, even outside of the abortion discussion, it's not providing care to the level that people deserve. There was another report, even from the New York Times, that went undercover and found that this healthcare being provided was completely inadequate, that people were kind of shuffled in and out. They weren't treated like a patient should be, with respect, like for these normal procedures like testing and stuff like that. So I just don't see any reason why we should be giving taxpayer money to an organization that's focused on abortions and doing other things as a cover.
Yeah, it's always baffling to me how, like, the New York Times, they're like, how could the company that dehumanizes babies and murders babies dehumanize everybody else and treat them like they're not a real patient? That's their business plan, New York Times. That's like what they do.
But it got the attention of their readers. So
it's weird. What's happening? Are you seeing that? Because I noticed that even with the New York Times with COVID, where, what was that? Maybe a couple of years back, they released they were like, maybe masks didn't actually work. And they started kind of going back on that, which I just think is a way for them to cover their butts because they lied to everybody for the whole time. And that's gross. But it does feel like some weird shift is happening because there was so many right-wing sort of media independent things that popped up over the past several years that, and a lot of those right-wing people have gone into the realm of true conspiracy. Like there's been sorry, not true conspiracy. They've gone into the realm of like actual conspiracy to the point in which it's like out of control. You know, the Tucker Carlsons and Candace Owens of the world, where they're just like saying things that are insane, and they've gone way too far on all of that. And that's sort of where the right wing media has gone. And what I've noticed is that you get some of these more left wing, like I think of what's the one, Barry Weiss, the press, the Free Press.
Yes.
I kind of like the Free Press. Like I feel like they're pretty honest. I don't agree with some of the things that they report and some of their opinions, but I actually read them probably more than anybody else, mostly because I don't feel like they're pushing a particular narrative. Right. Do you feel like, and this has nothing to do with anything that we've talked about, but do you feel like, I don't ever read the New York Times. So, and I don't ever really read the Atlantic or the Washington Post. Maybe you keep up with them a little bit more than I do. Do you?
Somewhat.
A little bit
on specific issues.
Yeah. Do you feel like they're moving in a less authoritarian sort of like trying to tell the truth, or are they still in that very, we're the experts, you're an idiot, just listen to what we say and don't ask questions?
I think it's still a mixed bag. There are definitely still articles that are written, and it's clear that they believe they're smarter than everybody else.
Yeah.
But I think there have been enough instances over the last 5 years, decade, where they've taken a stance on something, whether it's political, social, what have you, held fast to that stance and refused to investigate the other side, and then kind of got caught with their tail between their legs when the other side proved to be more true. Yeah. We saw that with COVID. We've seen that with several political issues. We saw that we are seeing that a bit now with the transgender issue, with a lot more studies coming out proving that these procedures are not having the mental health care effect that they have always touted. Yeah. And so I think potentially it's on an editorial level. They seem to be at least trying to push their staff to look at the other side a little bit more seriously and not write it off completely. Yeah. They do that with their own spin. Like you said, with the Planned Parenthood one, they're not going to dive into the tragedy of how many children are killed, but they will look into whether or not adults are treated well at these clinics. So I think they're trying. It's interesting. I appreciate that they've had a little bit more variety in their voice. But I think it's as a result of getting caught on the wrong side of an issue a few times.
Yeah. Yeah. They're like a kid who got caught lying, and then he kind of overcompensates a little bit on being really nice to everybody, you know,
just a little bit.
I can't stand. New York Times and all of those. It's sad what's happened to them because they are, I mean, like the New York Times is like a prominent, it was an American thing. Like that was an American thing. And now it's just sort of a joke, but
interestingly, I do still like the New York Times and CNN for international news.
Really?
I find, at least on the breaking news side of things, they do a pretty good job with live updates, and they do arguably have very wide nets of connections and sources. True. Yeah. So they do a good job with some of those breaking news type situations. Domestically, they're not my first choice, but internationally, they do all right.
Let me ask you this, and then we can wrap it up, because I think it has to do with kind of what we've talked about. I mean, you just mentioned sort of like, you know, the reports about transgenderism, and we have these reports about Mifepristone. How do you say it? Why am I not able to get that? Mifepristone. Mifepristone. Okay, that shows you how much I don't care about Mifepristone. I think it's bad. So we talk about these with these reports. Okay. So like as a reporter, you have to report on these things. But for the average Christian, the average consumer of news, some things I look at some of these things like the transgender, the reports that are coming out about how this doesn't actually do for people what they said it was going to do. And I think, why are we reporting about this? That's the most obvious thing ever that anybody could ever say. Cutting yourself up and destroying your life obviously isn't going to help you feel better. Right. It's going to make you feel worse. And I don't need a study. I don't need some sort of graph to show me that. I just like, I have the Bible says that sort of thing, but also I just like have eyeballs and I can see and hear and I understand reality. It does feel like there's this fine line between waiting for the experts to tell me what I should think according to the studies and the reports, and just being like able to see what's happening in front of you and saying, that's bad. That's going to ruin your life. I don't need the experts to tell me it's going to ruin your life. I can tell you right now, this is going to ruin your life. Don't do that. How do you think Christians should think through these sorts of things? Because I know Christians who would be like, well, we need to wait. We need to wait for the expert data. I mean, that was what COVID was. It was like a litmus test to see who was going, what was your final authority? Or was it the elites and the experts, or was it your own eyes? I mean, when the elites told people don't believe your own eyes, a lot of people just didn't believe their own eyes, which was terrifying, because that's how authoritarianism is born and continues, is through people just turning a blind eye to things. So big question, but do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think as Christians, we can point to the truth of the Bible. We can point to the truth of the moral law that the Bible gives us, that the Lord gives us through wisdom and discernment through his Holy Spirit, as how we know that these things are wrong. And I think that that's incredibly important, especially in personal relationships. If we know someone personally struggling with an unplanned pregnancy or struggling with gender identity issues, and those conversations are happening one-on-one, I think that's a phenomenal place for those points and for us to share our confidence in what is true. And we still need to do that on a broader scale. And we do that in our stories all the time. But these studies do a really good job of, in my opinion, meeting readers and just society where they're at. A lot of society does make their decisions based on experts. Yeah. And so when we have experts backing up what we already know is true, I think it's even more important than that we report on it to show, look, we've been saying this. The Lord says this is true. Here's the evidence. You always want scientific evidence for anything that we're going to claim. Well, here it is. Especially with abortion, the Mifepristone issue, it's crazy. They've always fallen back on this claim that side effects are rare. And now we have clear proof that they're not. And I think that that's really valuable when we're having that discussion, just as a sort of leveling tool of getting on the same page and pointing to something that someone who maybe doesn't share our faith can understand and will consider as a valid argument. I would always love for them to see the love of the Lord for his children as that valid argument. But with some people, that's simply not their measure of what's true.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I can see that. I think that that these reports they definitely can back up what's already been revealed as true. And then, hopefully bring somebody one step closer to recognizing that there are deeper truths than just the material, physical, or the data and the analytical and the logical truths. There's like actual moral truths and things like that. Although it is just a proclamation of the gospel that changes people. It's a revelation, not a logical sort of formula or anything. So there's that. No, I agree. I think that that's an interesting conversation, just because there's a lot of people who think that the experts, like, that's just who you listen to. You just listen to what the experts say. No matter what they say, they tell me what to believe and what to think. And it's almost religious in a way. The experts are their priests and their pastors, and they just listen to those people. And even as good Protestant Christians, we don't just listen to our priests and our pastors. We read our Bibles. Maybe the Catholics do. Maybe they just listen blindly. I don't know, but we don't. Not a Protestant, not the Protestants. Right. So, and no shade at the Catholics, but I think that is what they do a little bit. And that's what a lot of Protestants do too, by the way. But there is an individual aspect to this. And I think it's important to talk about that, because it can be easy to just start citing sources. Oh, this report. It's like, yeah, but we're talking about killing babies, and we're talking about cutting people up. And that is just bad. So yeah, no, that's good. I mean, this is all important stuff. I think the abortion thing, especially because of how, I mean, the transgender thing is important, but the abortion thing is like massive. I mean, so many women are having abortions. We don't even have all of the accurate numbers. There's millions and millions of abortions across the world every year. And in the United States, there's millions, and it's really a terrible thing. And I think we just need more reporting and for people to know what's actually going on. And so these two stories they're sort of like good and bad that you're reporting on them, because it's sad that these things are happening and that there needs to be reporting on this, but I think more people need to know that they're happening. So I appreciate you doing that, reporting on this stuff and talking about it. So thanks for doing this. Appreciate your time.
Yeah. Thank you.